This is a comprehensive summary of all conflicts that took place in Strangdru in chronological order. This video will include both international and civil wars, diplomatic crises, and even terrorist acts. That being said, this video will be useful for both new and veteran Ace Combat players. Our journey starts in the 1400s when the medieval state of Emeria was under unrest and the local lords were fighting for Emeria's fertile lands. The divisiveness left Emeria vulnerable and several foreign forces attempted to invade the country. King Aurelius II rose to prominence and he was able to unite the Emerian lords and successfully defend Emeria. A consequence of these conflicts was a strengthened sense of union in Emeria and the transition from a monarchy to a republic. Now we jump to the continent of Osea at the dawn of the 20th century. At that period of time, Osea was pursuing an expansionist policy against Belka, which culminated in the Osean War that went from 1905 to 1910. It is unclear which side won the war or if there was even any change in territory, but this was the first conflict that saw the airplane used as a tool of war. Belka was the first country to officially set up an air force, and according to the Balkan Air Power magazine, Belka had an edge on aeronautical technology and production. We now jump to the 1940s. According to the assault records of Ace Combat Zero, there was at least one war going on and Belka was once again involved. We don't know the name of the conflict, how long it lasted, or who else was involved other than Belka. But if you recall from Ace Combat's 5 opening cutscene, it mentions that Belka has tried to invade Osea time and time again. So it is quite possible that this was another conflict between Belka and Osea, one which Belka apparently lost. But this is all my hypothesis based on the hints that we have so far. It's now the 1970s and guess who's fighting again? Of course, it's Belka. They are now fighting in the Recton conflict. For some background, what today is the country of Recta used to be a Balkan territory back when we had what I like to call Greater Belka. In the 1970s, the people of Recta came out with this crazy idea called democracy and started to rebel against the Balkan government. Belka dispatched his military to quell the riots, but there was a fierce resistance because Recta had managed to set up its own forces, the Rectan Liberation Front and the Rectan Air Force. Their air force was small but highly skilled, which created a stalemate between the two forces. But this didn't hold up when Belka sent its elite squadrons, which broke the Rectan line and were instrumental in occupying Recta once more by the year of 1973. Before moving forward, a quick note about what was happening in the continent of Eusia. There was a revolution happening in the Grand Duchy of Szilágy, but despite being successful, the revolution was useless because Szilágy was soon annexed by the Kingdom of Erusia. The same happened with the Republic of Volzlaj. The games don't really give detail on when these events take place, but based on Mihai's age, I would estimate that all these happened during the 70s or 80s. Speaking of the 1980s, a new conflict is brewing up. This time is between the Osean Federation and the Union of Yuktobanian Republics. Strangdru had its own Cold War and arms race between the two largest nations, complete with hints of military alliances and the development of new weapon systems. Though Project Aces didn't explicitly mention official alliances, the states in the south of the Eusian continent were very pro-Osea, while the northern states were against foreign influence, be it either Osean or Yuktobanian, and this generated the 1997 Eusian coup, which we'll talk about briefly. With all this war tension going on, military spending for pretty much all countries was skyrocketing. Osea began the development of its maneuverable orbital spacecraft, later the Arcbird, while Yuktobania focused on the Arsenal ship project, later the Sanfaxi class submarine. The consequences of the Cold War were the creation of superweapons, well-equipped militaries, and high levels of government spending. The end of the Cold War is marked by the Balkan War, as both Osea and Yuktobania fought on the same side against Belka. In 1985, we had a famous event called the Wellow Incident, where some unidentified aircraft entered Balkan airspace and were shot down by the Balkan Air Force. Despite the name, there isn't evidence connecting the country of Wellow to this incident. Sometimes translating stuff from Japanese is complicated. In the next year, 1986, there was a border war between Yuktobania and its neighbor, the Republic of Kaluga. We don't really know how long it lasted or what was the outcome, but we do know that both Kaluga's and Yuktobania's air forces had extremely high casualties, all above 80%. In 1987, a coup took place in the Republic of Romani, which is part of Yuktobania. The calm regime that briefly took over power was suppressed by loyalist forces and reinforcements sent in from Yuktobania. As the 1980s come to an end, let's shift our attention to the northeast of the Oceanian continent because there's a lot of stuff happening over there. As I mentioned before, one of the consequences of the Cold War was the high level of government spending. Balkan entered in a recession in 1987, and several of its territories took advantage of the situation to obtain independence peacefully. While all of this was happening, there was an underlying conflict for influence and economic power in the region between Osea and Belka. The Aces at War book makes it clear that Osea was secretly funding Ustio's secessionist movement away from Belka, so Osea could gain access to the underground resources there. Moreover, there's the Great Lakes Resource Development Company controversy. The outcomes were clear though: an increase in Osean territory and influence in the region, and the political and economic destabilization of Belka. This and other developments set the stage for the Balkan War in 1995. To quickly recap Ace Combat Zero, Belka invaded Osea, Sapin, Ustio, Gabat, and possibly Rekta. Yuktobania later joined the war as part of the Allied forces against Belka for reasons unknown. The war went from March the 25th to June the 20th of 1995. For outcomes, we have the end of the Cold War and the arms race with the slashing of military budgets, strong cooperation between Osea and Yuktobania, a sense of world peace after the war's devastation, the refrain of using nuclear weapons, Belka's loss of status as a middle power, and their isolation from the international community. Except when it comes to the development and export of weapons. They kept doing that. Still, in 1995, and as a direct consequence of the Balkan War, we had the A War with No Boundaries rebellion, which is also covered in Ace Combat Zero. A group of defectors from all sides that fought in the Balkan War formed this terrorist organization, and their goal was to abolish borders and bring world peace by launching ICBMs with nuclear warheads all over the world. I honestly don't understand how they think they would be able to achieve that, but it doesn't matter because the Allied forces quelled their rebellion really quick. The Balkan War created yet another terrorist organization known as the Falcons of Dawn. They have carried out 7 attacks on Osean soil between 1995 to 2005, and membership includes former members of the Balkan military. And as far as we know, this terrorist group is still active. And before we put an end to 1995, let's remember the Scilly Islands insurrection that took place that year. An armed militia took over the islands in a coup, but they were quickly defeated after the Federation of Central Asia hired the Scarface Squadron to deal with the rebels. These are the events of air combat, also known as Ace Combat 1. Then, from 1997 to 1998, we had the Usean coup, or Usean Continental War. Tensions in the continent had existed for several years, and the nations in the north formed an alliance while the southern nations preferred making a defensive pact with Osea. The northern alliance protested and feared the loss of mining rights as well as an invasive Osean military presence in the continent. On the day of the defense pact signing with Osea, a coup broke out on several nations of Usea with the goal of uniting the continent while being neither pro-Northern Alliance nor pro-Osea. The rebels almost conquered everything, but Scarface Squadron was hired once more and quelled the rebellion. These are the events covered in Ace Combat 2 and its remake, Ace Combat Cross Rumble, or Assault Horizon Legacy if you prefer it that way. A major event happened in 1999 that would become the catalyst for several future wars in Strangdrew. I am talking, of course, about the fall of the Ulysses 1994XF04 asteroid and the devastation that followed. In order to not make this video extremely long, I'll be covering the Stranger Wars of the 21st century in part 2. I hope you have enjoyed this video and I'm looking forward to the discussion and feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching and I'll see you guys next time.